We all like to think we've got a pretty good moral compass, right? We know what's right, we know what's wrong. But what happens if you're stuck in a situation where every choice is the wrong one? Let's dig into that.
So, what is the right thing to do? It sounds like such a simple question, but we're about to put it to the test. I want to walk you through a classic thought experiment, a scenario where you have to make a choice, and honestly, every single option is just awful.
Okay, picture this. You're at the controls of a runaway trolley. The brakes are totally shot, and barreling down the track ahead of you, you see 5 workers. There is absolutely no way they can get out of the way in time. You know if you do nothing, all 5 of them will die. But then, you see it. There's a side track, and you can pull a lever to switch the trolley over. To catch, there's 1 worker on that track. So, what's your move? Do you pull that lever?
Now, when most people are asked this question, the answer is almost always the same. Overwhelmingly, people say, yeah, I turn the trolley. And the logic, it makes sense, right? It's a tragedy either way, but it feels better that 1 person dies instead of 5. So it seems like we've landed on our first moral principle. The right thing to do is whatever creates the best outcome, saving the most lives.
Okay, but hold on. Let's change things up a bit. New scenario. This time you're not the driver. You're just a bystander, standing on a bridge, watching this whole thing unfold. You see that same trolley, it's about to hit the 5 workers. You feel totally helpless, until you notice something. There's a very large man standing right next to you, leaning over the edge of the bridge. And a thought flashes through your mind. If you were to just give him a little push, he would fall onto the track below and his body would be enough to stop the trolley. He would die, for sure, but the 5 workers would be saved. So what do you do now? Would you push him?
And this is where it gets weird, because here, almost everyone changes their answer. The vast majority of people say, no way, I'm not pushing him. So wait a second, what just happened? That simple, clear principle we had, save 5 lives instead of 1, it seems to have just, poof, vanished into thin air.
So, what gives? Think about it. The math is exactly the same in both cases. You sacrifice 1 life to save 5. Yet our gut reaction, our moral intuition, is screaming 2 totally different things. Why? Why does our judgment flip so dramatically? Well, it turns out the answer gets at 2 fundamentally different, competing ways of thinking about morality itself. And here's the tension at the heart of it all. On one side, you've got what philosophers call consequentialist reasoning. This is pretty straightforward. It says morality is all about the consequences of your actions. The best action is the one that produces the best result. Simple, right? Saving 5 lives is a better consequence than saving 1. But then, on the other side, you have categorical reasoning. This perspective argues that some things are just wrong, period, regardless of the outcome. There are certain duties, certain rights that you just don't violate.
Now, the most famous version of that first idea, consequentialism, is called utilitarianism. You've probably heard of it. The philosopher Jeremy Bentham came up with the core idea, and his slogan was basically, the greatest good for the greatest number. You're just doing a cost-benefit analysis. You add up all the good, subtract the bad, and pick the option that maximizes happiness. And that's exactly the kind of thinking we used when we decided to pull the lever and turn the trolley.
But then you have the other side, championed by the philosopher Immanuel Kant. And he would argue, no, no, no. Morality is not about consequences. It's about fundamental duties and rights. There are some rules you just don't break. And for most of us, pushing an innocent man to his death, well, that feels a lot like murder. It feels like we're violating his fundamental right to live. And that feels wrong, even if it saves 5 other people.
Okay, so this is all really interesting as a thought experiment, but it's not just some abstract philosophical game. These 2 ways of thinking, consequences versus duties, they actually collided in a pretty harrowing real-life court case from the 19th century. It involves a shipwreck, a lifeboat, and an absolutely unthinkable decision.
So, back in 1884, a ship called the Mignonette went down in the South Atlantic. 4 crewmen managed to get onto a lifeboat. One of them was Richard Parker, a 17-year-old cabin boy who was an orphan. For weeks, they were adrift. They ran out of food, they ran out of water, and after about 19 days, the cabin boy, Parker, got really sick because he'd been drinking seawater. That's when the captain made a terrible suggestion, that they should sacrifice 1 person so the others could survive. And on day 20, they killed Richard Parker. Just 4 days after that, the survivors were rescued.
So when these men get back to England, they're put on trial for murder. And their defense? It's pure consequentialism. Their lawyers basically said, look, in a situation that dire, you do what you have to do to survive. It's better that 1 person dies so that 3 can live. They even made the argument that the survivors had families to get back to, while Parker, the cabin boy, was an orphan. With the prosecution, they came back with a purely categorical argument. Murder is murder. It doesn't matter what the situation is. They said Richard Parker had a fundamental right to life, and you can't just toss that aside because it's convenient for other people.
You know, these kinds of dilemmas, whether it's the trolley problem or the story of the mignonette, they're not really designed to have an easy answer. The whole point, as the philosopher Michael Sandel puts it, is to estrange us from the familiar. It's about taking the moral beliefs we just walk around with every day, the stuff we take for granted, and putting them under a microscope, really forcing us to ask, wait, why do I believe that?
And that's really the challenge here, isn't it? It's kind of unsettling. Because once you start peeling back the layers and questioning the principles behind your own gut feelings, you can't really go back to feeling so certain about everything. So the question isn't just, what would you do in this situation? The real question is, why? And once you start asking yourself that, well, where does that road of reason actually take you?